In health sciences education, success is often defined by competencies and outcomes. But an essential question remains: are our students and faculty truly flourishing? And is there a relationship between flourishing and patient care? As demands in healthcare and academia grow, education must intentionally create environments where learners and educators can thrive, not just perform. Welcome to Teach Well, Learn Well, a podcast series highlighting the scholarship being published by members of the University of about effective ways to teach. I'm Tom Lochner, Teach Well Sciences Each month, we interview our educators about their research and its impact on the higher education community. This month, I talked to Dr. Wicks, Teach Well Sciences College of Nursing, about college for creating flourishing nursing education environments, published in the Journal of Nursing Education.
Welcome, Nurs. I'm really glad to have you here and really interested to talk about your column, so let's just get into it. Can you briefly summarize the column that you wrote and why this topic is important?
So I have really been searching for some new concepts in nursing to really understand students' experiences in the educational system and how we can help them to have the most positive outcomes. And so I was just looking through the internet and I came across the Harvard Flourishing study. And it was an exciting study for me because it really focuses on several aspects, specifically looking at flourishing as a state of being where all aspects of a person's life are really positive and doing well. The person is doing well. And so when I looked at that, I thought, how can we create in an educational system, a nursing education program, opportunities for students to flourish where all aspects of their life have an impact on their educational experiences. And we can, as nursing faculty and as a larger organization, as a university, a system or university, really not as a system, but more so our campus, really look at creating support and resources to help students flourish, to do well, even in the context of wherever they're living in the present, helping them to navigate their educational experience, recognizing that they will have challenges in various aspects of their lives, but maybe we can provide them with resources to help them navigate all of those aspects, those different dimensions of their lives, because they do have an impact on their educational experience. They will have an impact on their professional practice. In the same way, it impacts faculty. Having experiences for faculty, having an environment and a culture for faculty that provides resources and support so that they too can flourish, because students flourishing and faculty flourishing would likely lead to good outcomes.
And it's an interesting issue, isn't it? Because we know that stress is really detrimental to someone's success. And if you're worried about, where you're going to get food or trying to get enough sleep or the kids are sick or just all those stressors that our students have outside of that time with us, that really affects their ability to learn what we're trying to teach them.
It does. It affects their ability to learn. We've seen, there was a recent study, I think it was published either in 2024 or 2025 by the American Psychological Association, that says that a large percentage of students, about 30% of students or more, I couldn't remember if it's 30 or 35, but nevertheless, that's too many, students experiencing anxiety and depression and not trusting faculty, not trusting their classmates. And that level of stress in the context of a challenging nursing program is not a good mix for success. And so I really think that we need to see students as human beings, whole human beings, which is consistent with nursing's philosophical perspective, to try to, we say that about patients and families. What about nurses and faculty? Creating that kind of a supportive environment.
You mentioned faculty. How can faculty be successful? And, we hear every once in a while about a flare-up in the classroom where a professor did something or said something that was unfortunate. And sometimes you wonder if the same kind of stressors are affecting those folks as well.
I agree. I think they are. I think people bring their family issues to work. They bring the experiences in the media, all kinds of things. I'm a systems thinker. I think everything is connected to everything and everything impacts everything. And so sometimes I think when those kinds of situations occur, we need to look at, really focus on, what in their life is out of balance and why did they, especially if that's not their typical response to those situations, what's going on with them that helps us to understand where they are, what's influencing how they responded to a particular situation today, when in the the past, it would not have fazed them that a student did something that was disrespectful or disruptive or that kind of thing.
We talked a little bit about what human flourishing means from a perspective as a student or as a faculty member, but is there a higher level definition of what human flourishing means?
It's really a very global definition, and the gentleman who leads this program at Harvard says that he admits it's very global, but within that global definition, it looks at dimensions like work and family. It looks at physical and mental health. It looks at virtue and character development and relationships. Those kinds of things are really important. And so flourishing takes into consideration what your status is in all of those areas, recognizing that other things will also influence it, things like resources and finances, because they provide kind of the context for all of those things kind of mixing together and having an impact on who we are, what we do, how we feel, those kinds of things.
I imagine some of it can be fluid as well. So you think you're in good shape with finances or your environment around you, and the next day, look what's going on in the Middle East right now, and think how quickly things can change.
Right. And so I do believe that it's a fluid situation. I do believe that, however, when there's balance in the other areas, people can navigate things better because they have the resources to do it. Everything else in life seems to be going well, but there's some things in the world, the larger world, that are challenging. And so hopefully what people will have is they'll have the personal resources or the relational resources to navigate all of those things. And that's one of the things I think faculty do with students is providing relational resources, developing trust, so that when students are struggling with things and they're not flourishing, they can come to us and talk to us. And I think we need to start these kinds of conversations when students are admitted to the program.
What you're saying also reminds me kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs too, as well. In order to truly achieve these higher level feelings of happiness and having your needs met, these basic needs also need to be met.
Right, that's right. And so again, that fits with nursing's kind of holistic perspective. And I think sometimes we look for things that are esoteric, when in reality, there's some very basic things that we can look at. And to me, this worldview, this notion of flourishing, and the theoretical perspectives that underlie it kind of tell us that we can be very practical in the things that we look at to help us support our students and faculty.
So you've mentioned a little bit about how flourishing connects with nursing's mission. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and specifically about nursing education and how that ties into curriculum?
Sure. So in nursing, we believe that we're unlike many other health professions in that we really do see the patient as a holistic individual. We take into account the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the social, financial, all of those things. Now, many more health professions are looking at all of those things now than because they're the social determinants or social drivers of outcomes. But nursing, very early on in its genesis, really looked at the person as a whole person and recognizing that they were also part of relationships with family and the community and that kind of thing. So that kind of thinking that's consistent with this flourishing perspective really fits with who we are as nurses. In terms of the curriculum, we teach students all of those pieces are important to the patient and family's well-being. Oftentimes in healthcare, other health professionals tend to be more focused on the patient. Nurses are really focused on the patients and families because people are relational. Our patients exist within the social context, right? And the immediate social context for most people is their family. And so nursing really is more family-oriented, perhaps, than some other healthcare colleagues are. We really know that the patient's going to go back into that family system, and that family system oftentimes is kind of the first line of defense in helping that person to manage and navigate whatever the health issues are that they're having. And when those fail, oftentimes you see things like homelessness for persons who are mentally ill and those kinds of things. When we don't have enough societal resources and family resources, helping the family members to deal with someone who has a mental health disorder can be challenging. If we don't have resources to support those family caregivers, which is what my research is focused on, then what happens is you end up seeing people not flourishing. They end up falling off the cliff, so to speak, and ending up homeless or incarcerated, or just different other things happen to them. They don't have the best lives. They don't flourish.
I love this opening question that you have in your column. I'm just going to read it. Is it possible that our profession's focus on maintaining the nursing workforce numbers has overshadowed the equally critical need to keep nurses in the nursing profession for the long haul? Can you talk a little bit more about this tension?
It's a real tension because we are losing nurses rapidly. About 18% of nurses who enter into the profession the first year leave.
Wow.
Some of them still shift around and go to other places. And they go to other places because of poor leadership, not enough nurses. I worked in ICU. When I worked in ICU, I would have 2 patients. Sometimes I'd only have 1 because they were so critically ill. It's very common now to see 4 patients to 1 nurse, which is too much. It's a lot of stress. And so we have people leaving the profession. So it becomes really important to focus on giving students the resources to navigate that difficult work environment. But in order for that to be successful, then our partners in the healthcare system, whether it's a clinic or in-house hospitalization stay, we need to have cultures that support nurses to stay. And so we do focus on teaching more self-care as part of Flourishing. And our ANA code has a specific section that talks about we're not obligated to care for patients and family without caring for ourselves because we cannot do one without the other.
I know that.
Yeah, we can't do one without the other. Again, it gets back to everything is connected. And so we need to fight the tension or balance the tension of teaching students how to navigate in difficult situations, how to use resources to flourish in all aspects of their lives. And that part of that is in the institutions where they are getting their education, then moving into the healthcare system where they work. They've got to have those resources to navigate that. And if we don't navigate that, it's going to be a constant revolving door of loss, because why would you stay in a place that does not value your well-being?
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. My daughter is a nurse,
Mhm.
and so I can speak to that part of what you said from stories that I hear, especially effective managers and what the role is of managers of making a workplace a flourishing place to work.
That's right. That's right. And I was very fortunate, Tom, in my own career. I always had excellent nurse managers. And so even in the most difficult situations, ICU, I was in a high acuity ICU. Yet everybody worked well together. We did things outside of work together. When somebody was in trouble with their patient, we worked together. And so I was very fortunate in my nursing career to be able to flourish in every job that I had because of the management. And it might not have been that the whole system that I worked in valued the nurses flourishing, but I had nurse managers who valued that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So let's turn our attention specifically to the Global Flourishing Study. Can you talk a little bit more about it and how that relates specifically to nursing education?
So one of the things about this study that was intriguing to me is that it is capturing data from all over the world, because the importance of community that thrives across geographic lines. And so they are looking at the same constructs and concepts across all of these different nations and cultural groups, because to some extent, they're all meaningful to all of those groups. And so the study is measuring this information. It's looking at some specific kinds of measures. They have a measure that I think it's like 10 or 12 items that looks at things like life satisfaction. How do you rate your physical health, your mental health? What about your relationships? How positive are your relationships? And so these are kinds of things that matter to people across the world, right? And so they're collecting data about this. And then they have a lot of other things that they're looking at. For example, they're developing partnerships with academic organizations to integrate flourishing concepts into those institutions. And, when we have our surveys every other year with our students, a lot of those surveys are very deficit focused. Well, they want to focus on the positive aspects. And what is it that the organization is doing to help students to thrive and grow? What role does the organization have? What role does faculty have in helping students flourish and grow and develop and become good citizens, really, right?
It'd be interesting to see and dig into that, because definitions can change and vary by region. So what it means to be part of a community in Asia is very different than what it means to be a community in Africa or Europe or United States. Even, here in the United States, we have very different ideas of what it means to be community versus, say, like Japan.
Right.
So are there themes that are consistent across all different countries and areas, or is it pretty consistent?
I think what happens is they kind of carry different weights,
Mhm.
is from what I understand from what the discussions have been. And so one of the things that they point out in some of their presentations on their website, a phenomenal website, is that in this culture, in the Western culture, oftentimes we don't think about things like meaning and purpose as much as some cultures do.
Yeah.
But meaning is important to us, but not maybe as important as it might be in an Asian culture, for example, and that kind of thing. So they do take into consideration as they're analyzing the data. They're looking for the commonalities and the differences. And it reminds me of a nursing theorist who existed. She was an anthropologist. She was a psych mental health nurse who was an anthropologist who went to some remote island in the South Pacific. But she developed a theory about transcultural nursing where she was looking at universalities and then those differences. And so that's another thing that kind of drew me to this work, is because it took into consideration the unique aspects that are important across different cultural groups.
So we talked about different cultures. Talk a little bit about the difference in what it means to be flourishing for faculty versus for students.
I thank you for asking me that question, because that's one of the things that I treasure, having been a department chair for 8 years. And from my perspective, as I've talked to faculty that I've worked with, they flourish when they have good relationships within the team, amongst other faculty members, and with leadership. So relationships matter. They flourish, I think, when they're heard and some of their needs that they talk about. For example, we have faculty who have needs to develop their writing skills or needs to develop their teaching skills, like through the TLC. But creating plans where every person in their annual performance review talks to their department chair about who they want to be and what they want to contribute to the organization, and then helping them to navigate all that, finding the resources. And I have to tell you that we have had some great success in the College of Nursing, really working with our faculty so they get promoted. Because part of flourishing for some faculty is getting promoted. They want to be promoted. And one way to do that is to be able to do all the things that matter so you meet these criteria so that you can advance in your career. So that's part of it. Some of it's just listening to faculty who are having challenges at home and helping them navigate that. FML, days off, considering things about when we have our undergraduate faculty who teach a lot, and it's really hard for them to navigate taking annual leave. And what we've advised them to do is, if you're co-teaching in a class with a team of people, then you all take turns taking a week off so you can get annual leave. So it's really about helping faculty to feel valued, supported, heard. So it's all of those things that has to do with relationships, meeting their life goals, work and life balance, all of those things we struggle with. And we even have our faculty write a goal every year on taking care of their physical and mental health. They can choose what it looks like. They have a professional development goal, but they also have one that's a wellness focus, a self-care goal. And that's important.
The way that you're talking reminds me of the sessions that we do with the faculty for the faculty new to teaching. And I think you've made a really good point every year talking to the faculty. And by the way, I'm going to really miss your presence on that. Is the humanity of teaching, right? It's the importance of students understanding their professors as humans and not just teachers. And what you're talking about, even as a management role, making sure that you're knowing your faculty and your department as humans and not just someone who comes and teaches for you beyond the contract that they have.
That's exactly right. And the interesting thing about it, Tom, is we have found that we have had people who come from other nursing programs and say they've never worked in a place, in a culture like ours, which we do try to foster this notion of flourishing. We never called it that, but we wanted to have a healthy culture. And so, but in essence, that's what we were doing, was helping people to flourish where they were, to be their best selves, whatever that looked like based on what they wanted to do, as long as it was in alignment with the work we needed them to do for us. So we've had people come from many different organizations and say that the College of Nursing is the healthiest culture they've been in, which it's
Great.
I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we talked a little bit earlier about how the definitions of flourishing might vary by culture in parts of the world. Can you talk a little bit about what flourishing means to people in different cultures?
I used to teach a diversity and social issues class way before that topic became something that was common. I did it in 1997 when we first opened the DNP program. It was a DNSC program initially. But one of the things I struggle with is trying to define what a construct or concept is for a particular group, because even within cultural groups, there's diversity in terms of what a particular concept like flourishing means. For example, in a particular culture like in the United States, for me, I might be someone who's highly spiritual. Somebody else might be highly religious. That influences this notion of flourishing. For someone who is very well to do, and then someone who maybe medium income or working class, flourishing might look a little different. So that I think it's kind of dangerous, if you will, to really think that each culture has a specific notion of what that is. I think there are some cultural nuances, but I don't believe there's one flourishing for someone who is from Japan and one flourishing for everyone who's from Brazil. I don't believe in that. I think there's diversity in every group. And what we do is we try to find the common themes, the common threads. And I don't know what those common threads are. I haven't delved deeply enough into some of the literature, but now that I'm retired, I can delve very deeply into some of these papers that they publish, webinars that they have recorded and made available to the public. So
I love that point that we can't just create this broad paintbrush of a group. And I think that applies to a lot of things that we do, because, students today, they all know technology, or they don't. And the broad
right.
stroke that we make about people is just really, I think, a disservice to people.
It is.
So thank you for bringing that up. I hear a lot about this needs to be part of the curriculum and that needs to be part of the curriculum, and we need to add this, we need to talk about this. And at the same time, we're trying to make sure that students are successful. We're trying to reduce the amount of time they have to spend with us. And so the pressure is on teaching them everything they need to know, mixed with all these other things. It seems to be a lot. How do you now add human flourishing to a busy curriculum?
So I have some ideas. So one of the things I think we could do is when a student walks in the door, we could talk to them about this notion of flourishing in the orientation process, just a little bit about what it means to flourish and why it matters to their success. And then we can teach them to use this survey for student self-reflection, because I think self-reflection is really important for students. I don't know that we use it enough to help students to really know who they are, what they're struggling with, and how their life is influencing their outcomes in school, because students will hide things from us oftentimes. They don't want it, and sometimes it's because they're embarrassed about some of the things that are going on in their life, but they don't realize that perhaps somebody else across the room is experiencing the same thing, or that their faculty is experiencing the same thing. So I really think teaching them to use that survey that they have available for self-reflection, so that they can think about the things in their life that are going well and the things that are not, and then working on those things that are not going well, so that overall they have the best opportunity to be successful. So it becomes a lens for them when they walk through the door, and they can use that same lens when they're taking care of their patients. They can use that same lens when they're interacting with their colleagues and then they don't get into these awful fights in class, or they can use the same lens when they're interacting with their instructor. Is understanding each other's humanity. It really is about seeing people as people and imperfect people, and how we can then navigate that so that everybody has the best possible outcomes. It's not to say they always turn out the way we want them to, but at least we make the effort to support people in the best ways that we can.
I love the comment that you made about self-reflection, because I don't think any of us take enough time for self-reflection. And having worked with the Teach and Learning Center, you know that we love reflection as part of teaching about teaching. But it also seems that there's so much noise around us now, social media and technology, and now AI. And even if you're not on social media, the music and everything is just a lot of noise that's around you. And so the idea of making sure that you're taking time for self-reflection, I think seems to me a really important part of this whole idea.
One of the courses that I taught most recently was a course that was a theory course for PhD students. And part of what we do in that course is, instead of just having a discussion board, they have to do a reflection paper on the modules. And they really have to think about what I learned in this module and how will it help me with my dissertation, and how will it help me in the future as a scientist as I develop my scholarly program. And initially you get very superficial answers, but then you give students feedback on those reflections, and they start to really think deeply about why they're in the midst of all of this in the first place. If they start to realize there's rhyme and reason for all the madness that they're going through in school, and they value it. They really value it because it's an opportunity. We tell students when they're in the doctoral program in particular, this is the only time that you in your life perhaps that you'll ever really get to focus on you. So really think about what it is we can do to support you, help you navigate developing a strong program of research that has meaning for you, right? That gives you purpose. I mean, we use that kind of language, which, I never thought about it before until just now that, that's the language of flourishing. We're talking to students about flourishing without even being conscious of the fact that we are using terms that are consistent with that philosophical perspective.
So you've really created this culture, it seems to me, over in the nursing program that this is something that's important. You reflect that in the way that you work with the faculty. That reflects itself in the way the faculty then work with the students. I think that's wonderful. So how would you recommend other nursing programs who also are looking at this and saying, yeah, our students, we need to help them, but they're flourishing as well? What recommendations would you have to other nursing programs to sort of make that an important goal as well?
I think starting at the beginning, I think integrating it into required expectations for courses. For example, if you're sitting in a clinical after the students have taken care of patients, and oftentimes we talk about the patient's situation, et cetera, but that would be a great time to reflect on what they learned, on what they struggled with, and talk about those things out loud and share that with their classmates and really help each other kind of navigate some of that. And people can affirm for you, yeah, I would have felt the same or I had the same experience. Well, when I had that experience, this is what I did. I mean, having this dialogue, I don't think we have enough dialogue. And reflection leads to really rich and deep dialogue. And I believe in testing. I know the value of testing, but I also know that when you have people to think and think out loud and to write reflections, that deepens their understanding and it makes it more personal and more intimate. And I think building those small pieces into our nursing curriculum don't take a lot of time, but I think the value of it is significant.
I listen to you talking about this, and I'm also thinking the same thing probably applies to not only nurses, but doctors and dentists and physical therapists and occupational therapists and pharmacists and all these other folks that are working directly with patients, that this idea of self-care is something that all of us should be paying attention to.
Right. I think with the holistic perspective, it's really about having the energy to do the work we need to do and being grateful that the system supports that. One of the other things they talk about in this flourishing perspective is recognizing the importance of gratitude. And so one of the things that students could do that's a really, at the end of class, say to students, oftentimes, what 3 things that you learned today? You could put it in a different, couch it in a different way. What are you grateful for today as a result of sitting in class? What are you grateful for? Well, I had positive interaction with my teacher, or I listened to other people's questions and I learned more, or whatever. But it's this notion of being grateful because gratitude has been found. There's empirical data to show that gratitude helps with flourishing, helps with mental health. And so many students are struggling with anxiety and depression and a lack of trust. These kinds of simple strategies can help to just change the landscape, I believe. I've been working in nursing a long time, and I've been teaching for a very long time. I've been a nurse for 48 years and in teaching for 39. And I have just seen these small things work. And one of the ways that I know they work is because when I made the announcement on LinkedIn that I was retiring, many of my previous students reached out to me and told me things that they learned in their encounters. And I was using this kind of perspective, I didn't know what to call it, just knew that it was really based on the humaneness of being an effective instructor, and then recognizing that my time was not wasted. And to me, that's the gift for the faculty member. When you see someone doing well in their profession, doing well in their lives, then it's been worth it.
So last question, you've mentioned that you are newly retired, and everybody I know that's retired all of a sudden discovers they really don't have as much time as what they thought they have. So are you going to continue to pursue this? You sent me an article this morning about AI and the effect of AI on flourishing.
I think that I'm a mentor at heart, and it's hard for me to cut that piece of me off because it's who I've been all of my life. But I'm saying yes to what I want to do and no to what I don't want to do. But I get all of this information and I know people who will benefit from it. So I'm still sharing resources with some of my former faculty colleagues. And I have the opportunity to write more now. And I love to write. And so I've been thinking about maybe even creating a series about this flourishing study and writing a series of articles about different aspects of it and its meaningfulness for faculty, for systems, for students. I mean, I can do what I want to do, so that's kind of nice. And it fits with who I am because I do believe in supporting people to flourish.
That's kind of appropriate, right? You said you haven't found your purpose, but mentoring and writing, right? These are the things that are going to help you flourish
Right.
as you approach this next chapter in your life, which people that you mentor will pick up on that. Well, Mona, thank you very much. It's been a great conversation. I love talking about flourishing. And as you've mentioned, this is embedded in the culture of the College of Nursing, and you definitely see it with the faculty that we work with over there. I will say on a personal note, I will really miss you being here. You are part of our panel every year we have for new faculty, and I will always treasure your comment. Give yourself grace.
Yeah.
And I think that really connects with this, right? Is that we need to give ourselves grace and forgive ourselves and allow us to make mistakes in order for us to be flourished. So thank you so much for everything you've done to support the TLC and me and everything that we're doing here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I enjoy it as who I am.
And that's this month's episode of Teach Well, Learn Well. I'm Tom Lochner at the Teach Well Learning Center at the University of Tennessee Health Sciences. Until next time.